Hey TFM, thanks for watching the video again. This is the longer version. I uploaded the shorter version, the summary first. This is just with regards to your new theory for who's running the cathedral with the flow chart in the middle there. I lose you at October 7. I think you're pretty smart, but I just wasn't sure why after October 7 you assumed that it could only be the Jews that are actually running the cathedral after all this time. So that's what I'll try and challenge in the video. Um, I'm just going to play a video first for what you were saying on your show, for what you were thinking, just in case people don't have time to read what's in the middle there.
See the video, but what October 7th showed me was that all the Marxist, communist, progressive shit completely flew out the window when Israel's threatened, and there's no reason to do that. There's no reason why would you abandon your ideology and attack your own followers to defend Israel if it wasn't simply because you're Jewish? That there's no other reason. And you see this in other groups too. Like other groups will be very firm in their convictions until their people are threatened, and then all of a sudden, especially with Jews, like they'll advocate for open borders, but then not for Israel because oh no, that would destroy Israel. Well, but open borders would destroy Europe, and they're like, well, yeah, that's a good thing. It's like, why is it a good thing to destroy Europe but not good for Israel? Because you're Jewish. There's no other reason to hold that belief. You're Jewish, so you don't give a shit about Europe, but you care about Israel. And the cathedral, both sides, both the Democrats and the Republicans, came out completely in the tank, absolutely pro-Israel, to the point where they attacked, now the Republicans they've always been pro-Israel. So I wasn't surprised that the Republicans are pro-Israel. I was surprised how the Democrats are pro-Israel. And they attack their own followers. Now there's been backlash from the true believers on the left, like the actual progressives, especially Muslim Democrats. They've been very vocal in their hatred of Biden for what he did. But obviously, what should be shown is it's not what the average person on the left believes that matters. It's who's running the cathedral. Black Lives Matter is not running the cathedral. The cathedral's run by the deep state and all this other shit, which they all completely went into the tank for Israel. Why would they do that? If they were a progressive Marxist organization, which is what I believed before that happened, they would have stayed consistent. I thought originally they were just a bunch of Marxist progressives, and they had a lot of Jews in their midst because Jews are natural Marxist progressives because they're always a minority and they lean very heavily towards the left. And that's as far as I took it. But then why did they just completely go into the tank for Israel? Why did they attack their own followers? Why did they abandon everything they believe in to defend Israel? There's no... I love to hear your 10-minute explanation how the Jews don't control it and it somehow they just really love Israel because I can't think of any other reason. Why would Marxist progressives abandon everything and attack their own side if for any other reason than that the Jews are calling the shots? And that's what the orders were. Hey, Black Lives Matter supports Palestinians. Stop it. Oh my God, these colleges have pro-Palestinian protests. Cancel all of them. That happened. Who was doing that? Why were they doing that? Who's running? Like, if the cathedral was doing that, and they did it instantly, there wasn't like a gap where they came out as pro-Palestinian, which would be totally in line with their Marxist progressives, and then only after like pressure from AIPAC or whatever, then they started like falling one by one. No, they were like instantaneous, everybody pro-Israel, or else. Why? Because they're Jews. If there's an alternative explanation, I'd love to hear it. I can't think of one. I've actually been racking my brain because I'm not anti-Semitic. I love Jews. I had a Jewish girlfriend. Halsey's my bro. But fucking, I can't deny what I see and what I experience.
All right, so why are so many Jews in the cathedral? I'm going to try and answer that here with some history, and this is the history that you've been showing us on the show. Okay. So number one, step one, natural selection creates winners and losers. So those are your words. This then goes forward to create slave morality. That'll look for a format to express itself. So progressivism, equality, communism, egalitarianism. It'll look for some formatting, some agitation, some illusion. Then it goes forward. It says their dormancy awaits a trigger. So the slave morality, that is the dormancy. And it awaits some kind of trigger. It awaits some kind of formatting. The one we're dealing with now in FDR's Third Republic is progressivism. Okay, this then goes on where I've got it there. I think it was about 1865. We had the U.S. Civil War. So the North obviously believed they needed to free the slaves. The South obviously didn't want that. It wasn't good for their economy. It would have hurt them too much. They fought a civil war. The idea here for the first column is to think of slave morality being dormant, natural selection creating winners and losers, and a result being a US Civil War. Doesn't matter that the North won. The idea is they freed the slaves. Okay. Now, number two here, the Civil War goes on for an important, a good 50 years or so, from 1865 to 1920 that you can see there. And this is 50 years of development within relative peace. And as you say, like with feminism, it usually exists and excels within the peaceful periods in between wars. There's a reason for that, you know that. So the slave morality is able to be dormant now for 50 years after the Civil War. Evolutions are allowed to occur. Theories are allowed to develop. Equality can start to spur on. It takes right up until about 1920. It wouldn't be until about the 1900s when feminism and equality, these ideas are starting in an underground. Mobilization and mechanization, as Stardust has shown in his earlier videos, really spurred that on. This goes forward from 1865 to 1920 to what it says there, periods of peace, just like I've been saying, and prosperity. They allow these dormancies of slave morality an opportunity to take form. And eventually this influences the electorate because obviously, as you know, in 1920 they give women the right to vote, but people themselves find this slave morality. There's a chance even the men are going to become more progressive. I mean, they did after all give women rights. This then goes to create a US cultural war. You'll notice on the right there's generally some kind of war or friction occurring. And this is where you've showed us that there's suffragettes, there's progressivism. Other foundations too that you haven't mentioned, like Lenin's underground. So for example, slave morality, forming a dormancy. Lenin was waiting for like 10, 20 years with Stalin and his rebels, just waiting for a good opportunity to go back to Russia and take over. When the October Revolution happened, when the Navy and the front line had enough fighting in the front line, they came back and overthrew the government, overthrew the Tsars. And that's when Lenin and everyone ran home, afraid the revolution would happen without them. Okay? So it created a US cultural war from 1920 onwards. Okay? I mean, you could say that it started with Wilson and FDR, but it's in this period that the US cultural war starts. Now, these agitations, like equality and communism and progressivism, in people's minds, they lead to an agreement. One of the agreements was women's rights. Wilson came in from 1913 to 21, and we get what we could call a progressive rumble. So there's a rumble. It's the beginning. The way I like to consider it is, if you've ever seen Alien 4, Wilson was the weird alien in Alien 4 that gave birth to that half humanoid thing, and FDR was the weird scientist chained up by all the yucky stuff, and he's like, what a beautiful baby. I mean, that's the way I see it. But yeah, so in 1913 you get these rumbles occurring, and it slowly builds up into FDR's republic. You get the Federal Reserve, you get debt systems. This is to address political problems, as you've been saying, the slave morality, the demands of the people. They're going to have to start some kind of welfare system, some kind of payment system. After World War I, he launches the League of Nations, Wilson does. Later it became the UN after World War II, but its goal was peace. Now, between 1917 and 1933, you get the Great Depression, political upheavals, communism, Russia, and nationalism start to spread worldwide. Okay, there are slave moralities trying to themselves express themselves against the empire, whether it's England, whether it's the Tsars, whether it's just the time. The people themselves are trying to find some kind of format relevant to their area to resist. Okay, these are the outlets that manifest. Of Got some examples there, nationalism for Germany, etc., etc. You can read those. It goes on to create a global culture war versus empire. So this is the foundations of where slave morality, which is going to become useful later for our discussion with Jews, takes some kind of foundation in the West and in other areas of the world as well. Alrighty, so then the culture war led to Hitler. He was a nationalist, as you know, and many of these cultural war types, whether it's Mussolini or Hitler or any of the other dictators or communists at their time, they had an anti-peace position where they were preparing for war and they were gearing up because empire itself, like Britain and the Tsars, they were becoming internally progressive, ironically enough. So the cultural war created a resistance. Now, in 1945, this is when you get FDR's Third Republic. The UN's created. It was basically done from a critical analysis of the results of World War II. They wanted to know how that could even happen. Jews had targeted. They were targeted by Germany, and this is recognized. It's useful in charging Germans in the Nuremberg trials, but industrial genocide is recognized and also in its opposition to progressive values. So Jews become a new minority priority for a way to beat Germany over the head with and to move forward for progressivism. Protecting Jews becomes part of the post-war progressive peace project. The UN, the League of Nations, the slave morality building itself. Now Jews become central. Not only that, they then centralize the Holocaust within their own identity. There are two parts of Jewish identity in America. If you're just a normal Jew, one of them is the Holocaust and the other one is Israel. So these are the two that you have to align yourself with generally. So what's important about this video is this part here, I believe. The Jews themselves become progressivism's original minority group. Before racism, before feminism, before all of them, it was the Jews. This has given them a privileged position that we're going to continue going forward. To slave morality, it's finding a new way forward with a powerful empire to push it. The US is chosen globally by everyone. They recognize the power of the untouched US military might and economic machine post-war. They were pretty much untouched. They developed the bomb, but they protect the weak. They don't bomb innocent people. They protect the weak. It's virtuous. It's admiration. You know, they admire it. The capitalist nations, all post-war, they all follow America, but they tend to inherit some of these ideas, like equality. Look what happened with Japan post-war. Right? So Jews become the poster child for promoting equality, moving forward, and a way forward. So the dormancy of slave morality is taking on a new form, isn't it? It's evolved with a new form, and now the Jews have a seat, and they have monopolized this position into the power position we'll see at the bottom. This leads into progressive rampancy of 1945 to 1991. This is a frictionless period. Slave morality dormancy expands itself into a new equality prioritized environment. The losers have found formatting. It's not just the Jews. All sorts of racial movements and feminist movements start to occur and start to evolve. They want to board the Jewish occupied equality train. The electoral maps reflect these values and these formats. Changes continue in this cultural direction. Opposition to any of it becomes backward, evil, un-American. America's bleeding heart bleeds itself with this slave morality. Now we're producing negative fertility rates. It's not a surprise. With regards to the Jews, in 1967 and 1991, the Jews exist from 1945 to 1967 surrounded by enemies. They have their 3-day war or whatever it was, 1967, and they beat everyone around them. Still heavily outnumbered, a need for collaboration arises, where Jewish security becomes a foreign policy of importance. How do you inject yourself if you're a Jew into the rest of the nation or into the United States, someone else's foreign policy security? Well, they will begin work on this. The US is immediately targeted by the Jews. 1960s give Israel also massive US support because they have the ability to defend their regional existence, but also they're anti-Soviet. A lot of the other nations that hate Jews surrounding them all ally with the Soviet Union for obvious reasons. This works until the end of the Cold War. Okay, so they've had to prove that they can defend themselves as a reliable ally, and now they're anti-Soviet. So then you have the anti-Soviet ally period. US progressivism and Jews begin a slow collaboration. You start to hear things like Judeo-Christian values becomes a political talking point. between Israel and US. They start to do weapons and intel collaboration. APAC is this is when it starts. It's got 100,000 members now. This is when it starts, and it's basically an Israeli front. And they put first and foremost Israel's security into US foreign policy architecture as their chief goal after 1991, when the Cold War ends and they have to pivot. Israel has to pivot. No one really wanted to attack them until Ukraine, for obvious reasons. Now, after 1991, we get what's called a darker ally with Israel, blackmail. They start participating in all sorts of nonsense. For example, Ace Elevators, about 50% of their employees, at least, are innocent. They're Otis Elevator employees. But the other half, well, I don't know. I've been trying to find information on them for years. I can't. But these are the guys that had access to the Twin Towers for 9 months, shutting down floor by floor, installing internet upgrades. So they're the suspect ones, obviously, for that operation, I believe. But in doing the chemical degree, we found the nanoenergetic composites in the dust, and I know you can't fake that with the readings. So I came into it from the professor side. Didn't know about 9/11 conspiracy theories or any of that. I just knew about it from not being able to fake the evidence. Well, whoever these Ace Elevator guys are, a whole bunch of Israeli companies actually helped America launch this. And who do we get a war with? All their regional enemies. Just like in 1967. They start becoming a darker ally. Infiltration. AIPAC grows. They start becoming kingmakers, funding particular political campaigns. As you know, Epstein, there's probably more Epsteins we don't know about, but Epstein, and those operations occur. They start getting political kickbacks from the funding for their own security, and they start sending it back to the United States. They become the darker ally. Now, protecting Jews is still some kind of need for the slave morality in America, but now it's an economical, political campaign with teeth that the public can't see. This leads us to the present day. Jews have, 40% of their population in the US? They've integrated. Judeo-Christian values, they work well, there's no friction. Military and political support for Jewish security has taken a form of slush funds, blackmail, weapons collab, intel cooperation. But we've got an alliance. But the optics, we can't even question it without it looking bad. I mean, how would you sever ties? Especially with AIPAC now, it's 100,000 people, and again, they're kingmakers for congressmen. It'd be very difficult, wouldn't it? They don't fund you, that money goes to funding your opposition. No one really likes to question Israel. Protecting Jews now is central to progressivism's march, because they are the original progressive minority group, and they're juiced in. Plus, if progressivism can't protect the weak Jews, then how can it stand for its so-called values? If this FDR-led republic, it can't, especially when boomers are leading the charge. They're not going to question any of this. Not at all. That's why we've seen the reaction we've seen for October 7th. Okay, so this is the history of it. Now, there is a hell of a lot of Jews in powerful positions in the neocon areas like Wolfowitz and all the Klan relevant to the PNAC document. I don't know if they're Cheney's friends or not, but if you look at the top dudes, they're basically all Jews. That would not surprise me. AIPAC has continuously arrested, they've got individuals in AIPAC that are getting arrested for receiving intel from US intelligence agencies or people that are working in intel. They give the information to AIPAC and then they give it straight to Israel. So obviously it's an intel operation, at least in some parts. Like the Jews obviously have some kind of power, but I don't believe they're running the cathedral. I think what's running the cathedral is continuing, and the Jews just have a decent seat. So the decent seat that we've seen, that the Jews have, I think is explaining what we're seeing. So now to defend US interest and their values, the original progressive minority, the Jews, that were targeted by Germany in the last big war, they have to be protected. Both parties will protect them. Like we've seen with October 7, they put the differences aside with divisive American politics and they come together and, they defend the Jews. Now, if you want to see that type of behaviour happen somewhere else in Australia for various issues, you can in the last 20 years. They did it for 9/11. Both parties unanimously just come together and support everything that America does with 9/11. They did it for COVID, they did it for forced lockdowns, they did it for every lockdown, they did it for all the welfare payments during the lockdown, they did it for the The final lockdown, which was the fourth one, which didn't end until they force vaccinated everyone to 95% double vaccinated, and all your welfare payments were cut if you quit your job, so everyone was forced to get it. Australia, they did the same thing that the Democrats did on October 7, and they silenced and went after the opposition. That doesn't mean that the pharmaceutical companies run the world from one incident. See, so what I'm showing is the Jews have a powerful seat, but they're not running the world. Other than what Epstein blackmail, some intel sharing, some weapons manufacturing, the building position of usefulness that they have, they don't really have that much. And a lot of their aid, their 4 or 5 billion or however much it is just from the US anyway. Then it comes back in slush funds, back to the US, back to politicians, probably back to APAC. But Israel has this ceaseless desperation to be under the US protective umbrella, and has since 1945. I don't think they pose any threat, and they're not running the world. Whatever is running the world, the progressive empire that you've called the progressive empire, or you used to, I'd say it's the Five Eyes. I always just consider it the Five Eyes people, but the US is in charge of that. But look at them all. Look at like Milley, he looks like a progressive. Look at them all. They're all progressives. That doesn't mean that progressivism is running the world. They just happen to be progressives that believe in protecting Jews, women's rights, this kind of stuff. Now, the Jews may exist in higher than reasonable importance within US objectives compared to other nations because of their foundational function within progressivism's origin, being a darling. But this is just due to the US's bleeding heart from the dormant slave morality that I've been showing. It's been going for nearly 100 years now. So Jewish position of weakness as well, it should be mentioned here that their desperation, it ensures a creative tenacity to try and inject themselves wherever possible to the top priority list for US foreign policy. At first they were an anti-Soviet ally in the 70s or so, and before that they were the victim, and then after, around about now, they're just Jews that are being attacked now for October 7th, and they keep repeating that narrative. No matter how many people they genocide in Gaza, they just keep saying that they were attacked. They'll do whatever they have to maintain that position, this good seat they've got. Now, good relations with the US literally determines the Israeli Prime Minister at all times. So clearly it's not Israel running America. Israel probably has some blackmail, but when it comes down to the really down and dirty stuff, like who made the nano-energetic composite for 9/11, or who was running all of the activities, the flight simulations and all that nonsense on 9/11, it's all America. It's all the Pentagon. It's someone higher than, quote, the Jews. They may be just as incompetent. Look how incompetent they are now. Look at how they're failing with everything. And then look at the Jews. Look at how they're failing now with this October 7th nonsense. I don't think the Jews are displaying any level of intelligence if they're, quote, running the world, separate from the failing progressive empire we're seeing coming out of America anyway. I think whatever's failing in America that's running the show also runs the Jews. That just makes more sense to me. So what? They've got Epstein, they've got AIPAC, they've got some power, but it's really only to protect Israel. So probably the most powerful part about the Jews is this organization you mentioned, the AIPAC. They've got 100,000 members, they've got connections to intelligence. It's a big organization. They're also kingmakers. So a lot of the congressmen, they won't just go for Republicans and hawks. They go for, the big focus right now is focusing, and has been for 10 years, on Democrats, anti-Jew Democrats. Okay, or anyone pro-Muslim, basically anyone not pro-Jew. They can contribute up to 25% of a congressman's funding for the year, this organization, AIPAC. Can they determine foreign policy? Yes, they can with regards to Israel. But anyone would be lying if they would say that this level of organization that's this powerful couldn't then leverage this power and this funding ability into other issues. Maybe they want something done in Syria. Maybe they were probably definitely connected to 9/11 because, again, we wiped out all their enemies. Okay, so this is the target. If there's anything powerful about the Jews, it's this organization. They also get to be hidden from the spotlight. So this one is the one that needs to be investigated, because this has got to be the height, I think, of the power of Jews. Alright, this is the conclusion slide. The only reason I made the video is because you said you were struggling to find any other explanation for the data you've seen. I believe I can compile all your data and throw it into my theory anyway and still come up with a different theory. That's why I made the video. Okay, so my conclusion for what we've seen with Jews from 1945 to now, the summary's there. So slave morality dormant in the US takes form through progressivism after a civil war. It starts expressing itself via women's rights, obviously liberating the blacks as well. You've seen the examples I've provided at protecting the weak, communist sympathies in America, also throughout Europe as well. It was just that time for when progressivism was expanding from its dormancy, trying to find formatting. Then you have 1920s, women get their rights. Wilson becomes the first progressive in an election, so he's one of their own. World War II then offers the Jews as genocide victims. They've always had their shit pushed in, but now they finally get to cast themselves as victims to the victors, to the most powerful one, America. And they become a new group in need of protection that validates progressivism's assumptions, slave morality's assumptions that the weak need to be protected. They really monopolize this position going forward. Again, they were homeless, they were beaten, and they become progressivism's original minority going forward for FDR's Third Republic. They cozy up to US daddy. The Jews become useful in charge in Germany at Nuremberg. In the Cold War, they offer additional functionality that I showed, and then after that, they become a much more dirtier ally. I know this because of Australia. If we were invaded and attacked, we would sell half of Australia to America in order to be protected. So we have the same level of desperation at our political level as Israel would as well. But Israel can't take an invasion, it's very small. So their position is desperate, it is immediate, and it is ceaseless. I expect them to be what they are. The level of infiltration of the neocons and the top of the Pentagon and some other areas, that's impressive. That would have took some time, clearly it has. That's the threat, APAC and the infiltration at the top. So they have power, but they have a seat, but they're not running the world. They're not running the policy for US against China or with Taiwan or against Russia or NATO relationships, and now how they're finally getting them. They're using the Ukraine war to get them to raise their budget to 2% of GDP for funding. Israel's running nothing. They're not relevant. You can't question them because of America's power, not because Jews are running the world. Now, it may be fading, but I think Jews will offer a new attack against the public. So I've been researching a man called David Irving, who's a Holocaust denier intentionally for the MGTOW community for about 6 months. Obviously, I am not believing anything he says about the Holocaust denial, but I'm watching how he was treated by the Jews in America in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. When you get called an anti-Semite, even back then you got cancelled from your bookstores, your books didn't get published, you got cancelled from your job, threats, all sorts of stuff. Well, they're trying to monopolize with central bank digital currency and with the ending internet anonymity or whatever it is on the internet. They want to use not anti-Semitism but hate speech to protect blacks, women, Jews, etc. I think Jews will be useful in that function going forward. Or America will use Jews for that function going forward. But I don't think the Jews are running the world. I don't think they're running the world. I don't think they're running America. They have leverage, they have power, but it's really only to protect Israel. So Homeland Security, they're going to try and target us the same way they went after David Irving. So they cast him and painted him as an anti-Semite, and they ruined his life. Now, he may have changed his mind several times, claiming Auschwitz didn't have a gas chamber, that there was too much holes underneath the doors for it to be gas tight, that there was handles on the doors, this kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, he just kept changing his mind, and now he doesn't even deny the Holocaust. It's official narrative. The last video you can see of him recently, he's not even denying it. Now, the system Homeland Security, they've painted MGTOW. The greatest threat is the decentralized nature of the philosophy itself. It's hard to target. If they could paint us with an anti-Semite brush, that would make it a lot easier. Seems to be a plan. Seems to be something they've wanted to conflate the alt-right with MGTOW. You spend any time in these circles, you research any of their Jewish questions, like their JQ shit, it's very easy to see through. It's all over Odyssey. It's very easy to see through. But yeah, I think that they would like us to do this. What we're doing, the mistake we're making, I think they would like that. TFM's work is impressive and it's continuous. He's never betrayed MGTOW. He's worked in Intel, he offers a lot, but even he can miss some things, I think. We should try to help him with more than just donations where we can. Don't forget to donate to Stardust too.